We're going to move on to our second panel, where we're going to focus in on some of the opportunities and challenges facing island nations. And to get us started, I'm really pleased and honoured to invite Ambassador Courtney Rattray, the permanent representative of Jamaica to the United Nations, to come and give us some opening remarks. Ambassador, you're most welcome.
I'm putting on my stopwatch because we don't have a lot of time. And Tara, if I trespass on anybody's time, you just cut me off, okay? Good afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing today? Okay, so since we don't have a lot of time, let me just cut to the chase. So the first thing I think you should know is that 90% of Jamaica's exports and imports are transported via ships, which is in keeping with the fact that we are situated in a region with very high maritime activity. In fact, the Caribbean region is the world's premier cruise ship destination. Also, about 33% of world crude oil passes through our region, and together with other commodities, 30% of world maritime trade transits the Caribbean. So we are taking advantage of this by positioning Jamaica as the premier logistics node within the Americas to capitalize on the trade and business opportunities that result from the expansion of the Panama Canal. However, this will require the creation of state-of-the-art logistics zones, upgrading and further development of airport and seaport infrastructure, and the creation of an enabling environment that will allow businesses to fully exploit our strategic location. I should say that we are also focused on developing a cadre of trained seafarers. We are a growing seafarer nation, supply nation, and our Caribbean Maritime University continues to promote seafaring as a viable career for Jamaican as well as other Caribbean and foreign nationals. In fact, the CMU, the Caribbean Maritime University, is the primary source of tertiary maritime training for Caribbean nationals, and it is the only IMO, International Maritime Organization, it's the only IMO recognized maritime university in the English-speaking Caribbean. It started off, in fact, as a maritime institute with just 300 students, and it has grown over the past few years, so it's now a fully fledged university with over 5,000 students. On the energy front, we are transforming our maritime transport industry towards a low-carbon future through improved energy efficiency. Another area in which we are paying keen attention to concerns the problem of ballast water. In 2017, we acceded to the Ballast Water Management Convention, and we are a lead partnering country under the GloBallast Partnership Program. The main aim of GloBallast is to assist developing countries to reduce the risk of aquatic bioinvasions mediated by ships' ballast water and sediments. The government is committed to addressing this issue and has tabled a ballast water management bill. We are also focusing attention on reducing maritime litter and other types of pollution. As of the 1st of January this year, Jamaica has imposed a ban on the importation, manufacture, distribution, and use of all single-use plastics. Let me say a little bit now. So now I want to say a little bit about an unsavory topic, and Secretary Kerry mentioned it. Unfortunately, given our location between the major drug supply and demand poles, we are extremely conscious, I should say, of the need to secure our borders and territorial waters. We are therefore giving priority attention to improving our maritime domain awareness as part of the development of a national border security strategy and action plan. We have made strides in protecting our maritime space and borders with the passage of enhanced customs legislation and maritime drug trafficking legislation. And we have improved the technological and currency monitoring systems at our international airports. This includes implementation of facial recognition technology, the commissioning of additional cargo imaging scanners, and the expansion of CCTV coverage of areas relevant to border management. As you may know, Jamaica is host to the International Seabed Authority. That is the entity through which states parties to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea organize and control activities in the deep seabed, the subsoil, and adjacent waters. In line with other developing countries, we believe that there should be sufficient scope to benefit from the minerals and other resources beyond the limits of our national jurisdiction. We remain committed to the development of rules to secure the necessary environmental safeguards for deep seabed mining. Let me just close by saying a few words about the challenges that currently confront us. Marine pollution by ships, overfishing, marine litter, and coastal development all endanger our efforts to harness the potential of our seas for sustainable development. Overcoming institutional overlap, and we heard some of that this morning. Institutional overlap and improving efficiencies also present challenges. The Maritime Authority of Jamaica is moving to strengthen its mandate as some of the functions of the Maritime Authority are being carried out and duplicated by our Port Authority, and that is something that we have to address. Another thing that we're struggling with is the porous nature of our borders, which make it difficult to effectively monitor and manage our maritime space and borders. The illegal flow of guns, drugs, as well as human trafficking are critical factors that we have to take account of in border management. Lastly, the impact of climate change will continue to hinder prospects for fully maximizing our sustainable blue economy, adopt climate-resilient policies, build capacities, and strengthen our national regulatory frameworks. However, we are confident that we will be able to secure the requisite technical and financial resources required through forging broad-based partnerships and effective cooperation with countries such as Ireland. So I hope I haven't taken up too much time, Tara, but thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador. Really, you imparted so much information to us about Jamaica. You were very honest around the challenges that you face. I know that many of those we share in Ireland around governance and around making sure that the right institutions are talking to each other and protecting our borders, and on top of that, looking to the future challenges and the current challenges we all face from climate-related issues. So thank you. I think you gave us a lot of richness there, and we really appreciate it. So now let's invite up our panel. Let me just let you know that we will be going for lunch at 1:30. I feel it's good to let people know when their stomachs are rumbling, when they can anticipate to get some food. But we will have a very rich conversation to get you there, so hang in there. And let me invite to the stage now, first of all, Ambassador OOW Tevi, the representative of Vanuatu to the United Nations. You're very welcome, Ambassador. Please join us. I'm also going to invite up Jim Gannon, who is the CEO of the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. You're welcome, Jim. We also have Piera Tortora, who's the coordinator of the OECD initiative on Oceans for All. You're very welcome, Piera. And finally, Jim O'Toole, who is the CEO of Board Iascaigh, which is our fisheries agency here in Ireland. You're all very welcome. Thank you. Are you hanging in there? So what we want to zoom in on this panel session is more about the challenges and opportunities that were all really well laid out, thank you, Ambassador, from a Jamaican perspective for us. And to look and see how some of those resonate within our different national contexts and within the broader regional and collaborative contexts that we have. So, Ambassador, we might start with you. Vanuatu is, I would say, unknown to many Irish people. You're far from us. You share many things in common with us, another small island nation with a very big ocean territory. I would say that from working with your colleagues over the years in the climate change negotiations, I know that you are much more aware of the risks posed by climate change than I think we are here yet in Ireland, having faced them, for example, with Hurricane Pam back in 2015. You've really felt firsthand the impacts of climate change on your ocean economy, on your people. How does that vulnerability, the risk that you're exposed to, how is that affecting the development of your maritime sector in Vanuatu? Is it where you're looking for future resilience? Is it part of your long-term plans for how you will keep yourselves a strong nation going forward?
Thank you. Well, let me first tell you where Vanuatu is. Vanuatu is near New Caledonia, and it's between Australia and Fiji. In the colonial days, it was called the New Hebrides. I think you all know where Hebrides is. It's an island in Scotland. So it's called the New Hebrides, and it's a condominium. It was jointly administered by England and France. So we gained our independence in 1980. We have over 130 languages for almost 300,000 population, but we have 3 official languages: Bislama, which is a trading language, and we have also English and French. So that's the basic introduction of our country. Now, in terms of the vulnerability, I think Vanuatu is in the zone where there is cyclones, and also we're in the Pacific ring of fire as well. So that is one of the challenges that we are facing. So we are, according to the United Nations, we are the most vulnerable country in the world. So we are the top on the list. So there could be some dispute in this data, but in 2015 we faced Cyclone Pam, which is Category 5 cyclone, and it wiped 66% of our GDP. So the wealth effect of natural disasters is huge. And this is also true for many Pacific islands and seas here, especially in the Caribbean. And also you see this in huge economies as well, like the United States. So vulnerability remains our key challenge. And in fact, now with I think the SDGs and the Paris Agreement, they provide us a good platform to have a discussion around sustainable development and how we should secure the future for us and for our children going forward. So this is the best platform, the multilateral platform that we can have a discussion, and this is the extension of this platform that today we are discussing the oceans. Here today we're in the Oceans Summit, and we're discussing the solutions and challenges and how we can resolve this together. Now, in my country, I think the biggest challenge would be the climate change. With increasing temperatures, with the speakers who are talking today, it looks like we're not going to hit the 1.5 degrees, so it's going to increase. So what does it mean for Vanuatu? It means there will be more Category 5 cyclones in the future. So that means there will be a wealth effect on our economy, as mentioned earlier. And also, what does this mean? That there'll be more corals dying, and that will result in less food security for our communities. So that will be a huge challenge for us. And it also will affect our tourism industry, because it is also connected with fisheries. So it has a ripple effect, and the tourism is one of the biggest mainstay of our economy. So that will be a challenge going forward for us. So it looks like with the increasing temperatures, it looks like we're talking about climate action, how to address our oceans, but it looks as, in reality, we are investing more into our global insecurity. So we need to reverse this investment so that we can invest more in our global security.
Absolutely. And I think, to hear you talk like that, if we exceed 1.5 degrees of warming, then we lose the coral reefs that are not just beautiful to those of us who love to watch them on TV or dive on them on our holidays, but which are fundamental to the food security and livelihood of your nation. And that really should be driving us, as Secretary Carey said, to just be getting on with what we need to do. Jim, I might come to you. In Ireland, one source of risk of insecurity to us is related to energy security, and we're looking very much to our maritime sector to reduce that risk and to create a new opportunity for us. Can you tell, especially those in the room who aren't from Ireland, kind of what our vision is? So how are we going to be part of reducing emissions so that Vanuatu's coral reefs stay intact?
No problem. Thanks, Tara. I think in Ireland we find ourselves with similar challenges to many of the island nations who are sitting alongside us today. We are remote, we are peripheral with regard to Europe, and we're largely carbon-based in how we heat our homes, in how we drive our cars, and in how we consume lighting and the rest. But this remoteness actually blesses us with a natural resource on the west coast. And that natural resource is the envy of much of the rest of Europe. And this is with regard predominantly to wind, but also to a certain extent wave and tidal energy. I think what's important in Ireland's context is that we have a resource that is vast and multiples of what we actually need ourselves. So to my mind, a real question for us is, do we limit ourselves to saying that to satisfy the minimum bar of our 2030 target, we require 2.5 gigawatts in and around of offshore wind? Or do we say, why would we ever limit ourselves to that ambition? Where we know that Europe will require clean electricity, and this is something that we can contribute back to Europe as we have been consuming resources in the past. A conflict in the middle of that is that these resources need to be accessed and harnessed conscientiously. We need to consider natural capital, we need to consider ecology, we need to consider communities and economies that operate in that space. But I think that the second half of accessing this sort of resource is another thing that island nations share, and that's certain cultural quirks, frankly. There's a reason that mobile phone companies can convince a consumer that a phone is worth $1,000, for example. And in each of these consumer decisions that we have to make, we have to think about how that person will make that decision. Why do I do a cost-benefit analysis of insulation in my ceiling, but I don't do a cost-benefit analysis of my sink when I'm trying to replace that? And I think we need to get into the heads of people. I think a separate part of that is that negative motivation only goes so far. So we need urgency and a burning platform for policy, for regulation, for national agreement, and that's a must-have. The building is burning. But for individuals making decision, it must be positive motivation. They need to want to do it. And for that to happen, we need to consider what their motivations are. And that includes welcoming some of this infrastructure in. It was at this conference last year that someone stood up from the audience. So in the great traditions of a kleptocracy, I'll use the phrase that he used. As it happens, he said that Martin Luther King didn't start his speech by saying, I have a nightmare. So we need urgency, we need the burning platform, but there must be a positive message where we learn from things that work, we collaborate, we share, we learn from one another, and we execute.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the opportunities around renewable energy, around creating a more equal world, a safer world for all of us and all of our children are much more motivating to all of us on a personal level than being told it's terrible, there's not a lot you can do about it. But I also think that this, you spoke about just doing enough versus being ambitious, and to be ambitious is to look also at the moral role that we play and the moral imperative to act as we are connected as nations, and in that actions by one nation affect so incredibly the actions of others. And I think that's then to come to you, Piera, is what is at the heart of the work that's been going on within the OECD, looking at the role of overseas development assistance, development cooperation in creating a more resilient future for small island developing states. And so you had your great report that came out last year. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, around what you see as the role of development assistance in providing both the security that small island states need in the face of these increasing challenges, but also the role of development assistance in forging some of these new economic models that are going to be part of sustaining the future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tara. So I think in the last 2 days we have heard a little bit about the specific development challenges that small island developing states face and their vulnerabilities. And actually at the OECD we have been doing quite a bit of work in the past few years on this topic. For example, we measured what Ambassador Tevi was talking about before. We actually measure that when we look at developing countries, really small island developing states are among the most vulnerable countries. Even when we look at the upper middle income small island states, they're still 73% more vulnerable than larger upper middle income countries. And why is that? It is actually because we know it's small countries, small population, dispersed, small economies that actually rely on one or two sectors very often. And this means that these economies are especially vulnerable to external shocks, both economic shocks, and we've seen it during the global economic crisis. Actually, small island states were among the developing countries that were hit the hardest during the economic crisis, and largely because of the tourism sector acted as a transmission mechanism. But also when it comes to natural shocks. And when a natural disaster or a hurricane hits small island states, there might be small numbers in terms of deaths, in terms of damage. But the relative weight of those impacts are so great. And we've seen it in 2017 when the hurricanes hit the Caribbean. Dominica recorded damage of over 226% of GDP. So in the small island states, really, natural disasters can wipe out overnight entire sectors of the economy and erode development gains accumulated over decades. We also estimate that small island states, on average, like 1 to 9% of the GDP of small island states actually is foregone because of natural disasters. So we have done a little bit of work on that, but really right now what we're doing at the OECD, we're trying to focus more on also helping small island states turn some of their weaknesses into strengths. And we have heard that small island states are small countries, but large ocean countries. We have heard that in Ireland, the sea area actually exceeds the land mass by 10 times. Well, that figures is over 100 times for many states, for example, in Cabo Verde, and it's over 1,000 times for other states like Palau, for example. So we really think that it is an investing both in old, traditional ocean sectors, but also in new ocean sectors like marine biotechnologies, like ocean energy, etc., that really small island states have a lot of potential for diversifying more their economies, boost resilience, and really embark on a path of sustainable development. And we have heard today a lot about environmental sustainability, and I think we never hear about that enough. But there is also another aspect of sustainability that probably we haven't touched upon a lot today, and that is social sustainability. So many small island states already rely on ocean-related sectors for their economies, fisheries, tourism, and the sustainability that we need to increase is not only environmental sustainability, but it's also social sustainability, because these sectors too often create for local population only low-paying jobs, or too often sectors, the revenues generated in these sectors are largely, for a large extent, do not stay in the country. It is estimated that for the tourism sector in some of the Caribbean seas, about 95% of revenue goes abroad because of profits repatriated because of the cost of imports, etc. So at the OECD, we are embarking now on this work that is called Sustainable Oceans for All, which aims at supporting small island states, but also other developing countries benefit, harness their ocean wealth, harness the benefits of the sustainable ocean economy. How we're doing this? We're actually pulling together expertise from across the house, from science, technology, and innovation, from development and finance, from environmental protection. And this is, for us, a new direction at the OECD, really bringing together the expertise from across the house to put it at the service of small island states and other developing countries. But it is also a commitment that will have some very concrete results and deliverables very soon. So we're producing new work that looks at the opportunities and challenges of the ocean economy across developing countries that will contribute to the high-level conference on ocean co-hosted by Portugal and Kenya next year. And we're also embarking a number of country diagnostics of the sustainable ocean economy. We have been earlier this year in Grenada and Antigua and Barbuda. We will be later this month in Cabo Verde. We're also engaging with Kenya and Indonesia. And the three main pillars we're looking at in this research, both at the global level and in this country diagnostics, is really looking at using our databases and models, looking at what are the prospects of the ocean economy across developing countries, in what sectors do opportunities lie, how are some of the global threats linked to climate change and other global trends going to impact these economies, helping the countries really measure how big their ocean economy is right now, and what are some of the policy frameworks that need to be in place in order to make it sustainable. And we're also looking at the role that the international community can play in all of this, and the role of concessional finance. How can we use scarce concessional finance better in order to de-risk some of the investments? How can we use it more innovatively to create that financial innovation that is needed to support the development of the ocean economy in many small island states and in many other developing countries. So I was very pleased to hear about this new strategy that Ireland is launching for engaging with SIDS, and really pleased to hear that Ireland is putting small island states, the ocean and climate at the heart also of its new development cooperation policy, and I really look forward to work with all of you, work with Ireland, work with all the small island states and other countries to move this agenda forward.
Thank you, Piera. And it's interesting to hear that within the OECD as well, as you said, you have the different parts of the house working together around these ocean challenges, around the challenges for small island developing states. Because, yeah, I don't think we can separate social vulnerability from environmental or economic vulnerability in any of these dilemmas, or indeed to capture the opportunities. Jim, it would seem to me that the Irish fisheries sector is a really good case in point where we need to look at balancing social sustainability, the livelihoods of fishermen, the healthy food that we all need to eat, with the economic imperative to make this a sustainable livelihood, a sustainable economic sector, but then obviously balancing that with the environmental imperative to look after our fish stocks and our ocean ecosystems. So how are we managing those different challenges here in Ireland at the moment, and what's BIM's role within that?
I think, Tara, that they're absolutely interrelated, that we have to look at the sustainability challenge in terms of the triple bottom line, in terms of environmental, economic and social. And I think it's interesting when you look at the seafood sector in Ireland in all its forms, be it fishing through aquaculture and seafood processing. There are about 14,000 people employed in the sector in Ireland. About 9,000 of those are employed directly, about 5,000 indirectly. And we have a very long coastline, over 3,500 kilometres of coastline. So it's a sector that is quite spread out and disparate across the country. But I think it's important to understand that in some of our coastal communities, the percentage of people that are employed by the seafood sector can vary between 6 and 12%. And therefore, in those coastal communities, there's a very high dependence on the seafood sector in all its forms, and the economic lifeblood of those communities is absolutely correlated to the health of the oceans. And therefore, we have done some studies in terms of understanding the social impact. And that's why I think it's very important that the environmental sustainability is at the root cause of the future of the sector, but the impact is also in terms of the social fabric of those communities. And that's why I think in BIM we look very much at having sustainability at the core of everything that we do, but we look at it in terms of managing a resource and trying to make sure that our fishermen are able to fish more sustainably. Some people might have seen at Seafest, for example, some of the gear technology work that we do, where we are working with fishermen to have more selective gear so that they catch what they target and reduce bycatch. And of course, that's in the framework of the landing obligation as part of the CFP. But that in turn, I suppose, leads us into the work that we do in innovation, so that we identify new opportunities so that seafood processors and indeed people that are involved in all parts of the seafood sector look at the unit raw material that they have and see how they can develop smarter ways of doing business so that they extract the most value out of that from a scarce and finite resource. So in my view, that drive to understand and innovate is very closely correlated with having sustainability and a thought for managing a finite resource for future generations are quite interchangeable.
And just picking up on some of the comments made earlier, where people have placed a strong emphasis as well on plastic pollution, marine pollution. You've been working with fishermen not only to work with them differently around their gear and reducing bycatch, but also in terms of your Fishing for Litter program. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly. I think Secretary of State Carey made a very good point in his speech this morning about working with fishermen. And also they made the remark that fishermen are born conservationists. And I think maybe perhaps that their role in that is not recognised enough. And the Clean Oceans initiative that you referred to is an umbrella whereby we're trying to engage the seafood sector in Ireland in all its forms to take a much more proactive role in sustainability. And we're meeting an absolute open door in terms of working with fishermen so that they understand that the sea is their workplace, and in many cases they're working from the one generation to the next, and they have that view of the future. So we're tasked with trying to recruit all fishermen to get involved in this program, whereby they bring ashore the litter that comes up on their nets, and we try and help them to do that in a responsible way, so that material can be repurposed and recycled. And the openness with which that has been received is very, very welcome, and we're very confident that we can get everybody involved to do that.
Okay, great. Ambassador Tevi, just when I was listening to Jim there, he spoke a lot about getting communities and local fishermen involved in fisheries policy. I know that you have a big fisheries sector in Vanuatu and a tuna processing sector. How do you make sure that communities are involved in decision making around how ocean resources are governed? Do you have particular ways that you consult with and ensure the participation of local communities in decision making around fisheries and climate, for example?
Well, Vanuatu has adopted a national oceans policy around 2014-15. So we have adopted a national ocean policy, and we have consulted the the fishermen and all the communities that are key stakeholders that are involved with the ocean day to day. So it's a long process, and at the end we came up with our national oceans policy, and it's currently being implemented. And one of the areas that we try to involve the community as well as regulation is since last year we have banned the single use of plastics. So we have banned that now. And we are with the UK and another Commonwealth country as part of a Commonwealth coalition to provide leadership. And so we end up banning single use of plastics, and sometimes this year we will extend it to disposable diapers and styrofoam plastics. So we will do that sometimes this year. But of course, we are involving our communities, and I think our basic policy is our National Sustainable Development Plan, which we try to, we already integrate the Sustainable Development Goals, and also the sector policies and National Ocean Policy, which we are fully involved, the community are fully participating in that plan.
So, thank you. You're doing. Sometimes it's a great advantage to being a smaller nation. You can just decide that that's the end of single-use plastics and do it, and then move on to the next thing. So I think that's where we can all learn from each other, and that leadership that you're showing. I also know from working with your colleagues that within that community engagement work that you do, you have a really strong focus on gender equality, and that is reflected, I would say, through all of your diplomats and everyone that I have met that's representing Vanuatu internationally. And that's really inspiring, I think, for so many of us in other countries to learn from that leadership. We're starting to run out of time, but Jim, just to come back to you, you touched on it lightly, but governance of energy, governance of marine energy, how we balance the top-down legislative policy regulation with the bottom-up engagement of communities as we shape Ireland's future in terms of renewable energy and marine energy. What's your vision for that? How would you like to see that all panning out?
So I think part of that has started with the consultation process around the marine spatial planning piece. I think what's really important is that instead of speaking to extremes at the end of a spectrum of stakeholders, we need to bring people towards the middle. Look at other jurisdictions, learn from those jurisdictions and say, yes, you can have many different activities ongoing in parallel. You can in fact protect certain areas from certain types of activity while facilitating other types of activity. And I think that's a key message for me coming out of today, is that where we have excellence in our own countries, we must share that. And so I'm going to say it quite straight. Ireland is world leading at the amount of wind we are able to put onto our grid at a point in time. So much so that recently Australia sent their regulator, their Department of Energy, and also their transmission grid operator to learn from that. So any country there, as a small island, looking at putting renewables on their grid, we can share that with you. If there is excellence...
So come and get his card before he goes, and make sure that you can
If there is excellence in Jamaica around efficiency in the fleet, we want that. Give us that, and we'll trade you our expertise around A, B, C, D, and E. I think technological experience in the different countries we really can harness. As island nations, many with a colonial past, we tend not to have sufficient levels of confidence. So I want people to be proud and speak out about your excellence and share that experience. And particularly, final point, when it comes to engaging business and finance in the transition. Business, technology, and finance is now multinational. So whatever conditions in regulation or in your market that you put in place that brought private finance to the transition in climate or in ocean wealth, we need to learn from that, and we need to accelerate that, because our exchequers cannot make this transition on our own. So everyone share your excellence, be proud and be brave.
Yeah, thank you. And I really think that is where it is going to be at, the open access, the collaboration across all sectors, as has been touched on. Piera and Jim, I'm going to come back to you for one reflection each. Piera, when you read the new SID strategy for our Irish Aid and our Department of Foreign Affairs, what in there most resonated with you from the work that you've done on the role of ODA in supporting small island developing states? In a minute.
Okay, well, I think first of all, it was very encouraging to see that there is a broader recognition of the development needs of small island states. So coming from the discussions at the Development Assistance Committee at the DAC, at the OECD, for a long time, actually, the specific challenges of small islands were the concern of very few of our members. So it's great to see that that is actually growing, and there is a growing recognition, and really the recognition that these countries need some more tailored approaches. And I think, you know, when it comes, it's very good also that there is a strong recognition of the need to invest more in climate and ocean, because this is also where we really see the potential. Emerging figures that we're coming up with in terms of ODA for ocean are quite, quite worrying, because we see that for seeds is about less than 6% of ODA that is spent on ocean, on the sustainable ocean economy. It's very little globally. So that needs to be stepped up. It also needs to be provided in a more integrated way. I think we talked also before about the way that, you know, some donors actually are doing things here and there in some of the sectors, but we need a more integrated approach to the sustainable ocean economy, and I hope that this strategy will take that on board. And we also need more like bolder and more innovation aid schemes that can really support the needs of small island states and other developing countries for the sustainable ocean economy more broadly. So again, we really look forward to taking some of the great ideas that are in this strategy and work with you to make it a reality on the ground.
Okay. Thank you. And Jim, just to end with you, so you spent the last few days with all of our new friends from small island developing states. What is it that you think Wara BIM has to offer in terms of know-how? What do you hope that your new colleagues come back asking you to collaborate on in this coming year?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the conversations that we've had over the past couple of days has been a conversation of equals, and it's been an exchange what it is. So if we can offer anything in terms of how we engage with our seafood sector to help them to adopt voluntary standards and initiatives, we're very happy to do that. But I also look forward to being able to receive good ideas from them. So I think it's very much about collaboration.
Absolutely, and I think that's our whole purpose in the summit today. So the good news is you've made it to lunch. Woohoo! Well done, everybody, and thank you to our panelists.